So good afternoon, everybody. And as and when people join in, let's kickstart this conversation. Build it and they will come only works in the movies. Brands need to be built, nurtured, and evolved. Only then they may come and some may stay. Marketing and brand building is hard job. And in today's world of competition, excess competition, and so much noise and content overall, brand building and marketing, creating an impression and letting that impression remain with people has become even harder. However, what has also been interesting is the evolution of marketing and how tech has been helping in this evolution and journey and making marketing more interesting and impactful. While, of course, it's an upside that there's technology, tools, and so many data and insights that's available, it can also be very confusing to understand how to use this technology, right? Instead of using technology to automate processes, how do we think about using technology to enhance human interaction? All of this conversation and more is what we plan to get through today in our webinar. We have our colleagues and marketeers joining us today for this discussion, and I want to introduce them and thank them for joining us. Dan McAvoy, Vice President, Digital Marketing at CL Tech. Mark McCluskey, Vice President of Global Marketing Technology, Operations and Effectiveness, Genpact. Ramya Vishwanathan, Senior Director of Marketing, Lowe's, and Ranjita Ghosh, Chief Marketing Officer, APMEA and India Corporate Initiatives, Wipro. Thank you all for joining us today, and I am very, very excited about today's conversation. Marketing as a field has really seen some evolution, right? And especially with the introduction of technology. There have been many aha moments for us, and many weird and scary moments too, when we just felt overwhelmed with how marketing has been able to kind of spot us, identify us, and engage us. One of my personal moments of realization that marketing is never going to be the same as before was when I was, first time, almost 10 years back, looking for a holiday vacation plan on Google, and then Facebook suddenly started popping hotel options and flight options for the destination. Now, to a lot of us in the audience, this may seem nothing unusual, but about 10 years back, this was very creepy. It really scared us because we had never felt tracked, or this was like almost like as if the walls had ears, and and I wasn't even talking for that matter. And there have been many, many more aha moments and exciting opportunities and ways in which marketing has been able to engage with people since then. And to discuss some of those and more, let's kickstart the conversation. What I'll do is I'll ask my co-panelists to introduce themselves and then share something, one of their experience or something that they do in marketing, which has tremendously evolved or changed, or rather today they're doing something they'd never imagined when they started their careers. I'll go in the reverse order. And Ranjita, can I request you to introduce yourself and also share something of that amazes you?
Sure. Thank you, Sukanya. That was a great introduction. And welcome to everybody who is here with us today. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. And we hope this will be a good conversation and you'll have some good takeaways. In terms of my introduction, I have been associated with sales and marketing now for about 2 decades. Sales, especially from the perspective of business development, working on large deals, working on demand aspects with regards to customers, and even focusing on customer relationship management. So these have been my core areas of focus. And of course, while I've been in marketing, it's really the whole value chain of marketing. And it's almost a decade now that I have been in the marketing function, seen the evolution of the function, and various changes that, of course, have happened over a period of time. So going back to Sukanya, the point that you made, what really is that one experience or so, while there are many, I think I'm going to talk about one specific aspect, and that is more to do with how we've started looking at both data from an internal point of view and the application of data and the various relationships around that from an external standpoint. So when I talk about data from an internal point of view, it is about how are we looking at customer data? How are we looking at our channels, our communications, methods of engagement, methods of building traction, and even deriving some very meaningful outcomes from all of that, which is sort of fueling back into the organization to design programs, to measure the effectiveness of programs, and even help us anticipate aspects that are emerging in the marketplace, and how can we be more responsive and attentive to that. Now, this is something which, of course, we did that. Now, as the function has evolved, the ways and techniques that we use to do this has significantly evolved. My experience is primarily in the enterprise B2B space. And here, when we look at customer accounts, so it is very large enterprises, global enterprises spread out across the world. And even the way that we are understanding the client landscape itself, their needs, their persona, their demands, a significant shift in that. Now, I'm going to talk about this more as we go into the conversation, but this is just a precursor to what's going to come. Back to you, Sukanya.
Thanks, Ranjita. Ramya, you're from the world of B2C marketing, and you reach out to millions of people who are your customers. If you can introduce yourself and even tell us a little bit about some experiences that you think tech has completely redefined.
Great. So Kanya, thank you, and Ranjita, thank you for setting the stage as I build on what you spoke. I'm Ramya. I lead marketing here at Lowe's in India. I have a broad spectrum of responsibilities, starting from creative, so making sure we drive traffic to our site and our stores. How do we manage our two loyalty programs that we have? We have a unique position of having one for homeowners and one for our pro customers. That itself gives you a sense for how different our customer base looks like. And of course, how do we lean in on all the data that we gather? How do we make sense of that data and sort of feed it back into our campaigns and to make those connections with customers better? So I've been in the marketing field for relatively a shorter period, maybe the last 7 years, but I've been an industry veteran when it comes to GCCs. I've also been a consultant with one of the big fours for nearly over a decade. So I've seen a lot, but I'm actually working today in what Sukanya cheerfully called creepy. That's my life. That's my everyday life. And one of the things that the biggest change that we've seen in the last couple of years, and now it's mainstay. So it no longer surprises our customers when we preempt what they may want to buy, what we want them to, when do we want them to buy, and what are those products that might inspire them. So the whole world of personalization is a great example of where technology and data have come together to help marketers like ourselves to sort of read in and make plans for what we want to share with the customer. How do we want to meet our customers? Today they're available everywhere. How do we want to meet them on email? How do we want to meet them on social media platforms? On search platforms, or even in store as they walk in. So as my team works through really 60 million customers and how to reach them on a daily basis, the level of personalization and data, Ranjita almost spoke to it on data and application of data, especially in relationship to the external world. That plays out beautifully for us as B2C business. We end up finalizing what emails should go, what kind of offers do we want to give our customers, how do we engage them to come back to for one more trip, how do we increase the basket size. So for me, that's the biggest unlock technology and data coming together has offered. And I'll too speak to some of those as we go through this hour. So I'm just setting that context here. And Sukanya, back to you.
Thank you, Ramya. Mark?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark McCluskey. I'm based out of London in the UK. So my current role, I work for Genpact and I head up their marketing, technology, operations and effectiveness team. So really my remit really covers how we look after technology, what are digital channels, project management, marketing planning, finance operations, performance marketing and analytics. And actually it's a good blend of areas to cover because they all get intertwined very closely. And that data thread, which is coming up increasingly in this conversation, certainly runs through all of them. I think when I look back at your question around what's made a difference in marketing over the last sort of 10 years or so, I think one thing that really jumps to mind is when I was in marketing 10, 15 years ago, the mantra that kept coming into the fore then was data is the new oil. It was a phrase I keep hearing over and over again. And probably around the time you were starting to see your pop-ups for flights and Facebook and Google all coming together because it was really moving quite rapidly at that time. I think around then as well, we started to see the introduction of business intelligence and data visualization tools. So that really made a massive difference and they've evolved rapidly over the years. And what they've really done is giving us a position where we can actually serve up our data to an entire marketing department in a way we could never have done before. So access to things such as real-time data views, creating bespoke dashboards for marketing teams to look at, is something that just didn't exist years ago. And I think what that's really changed in terms of the marketing departments I've been working in, and certainly here at Genpact. First of all, you're starting to create a culture of self-service. So someone doesn't have to go and knock on some business intelligence team's door to get information. Anyone can go and get it. And that really plays into how marketing planning gets done, how we're analyzing what we're doing and what we're delivering. So really a big step change in terms of just looking at ROI, the effectiveness of marketing overall. I think the one thing I would call out and where I think the next few years are going to go is it has its limitations. One of my own personal challenges when you're looking at this, having lots of data is great and understanding what's happening. But the challenge has often been, why is it happening? Because that's the ultimate exam question between a piece of data and an insight. And I think this is where we're seeing AI coming more and more into the fray. That's basically helping. And you can now ask an AI tool a question which can help basically disseminate lots and lots of data and start to give you hypothesis. Now, there's still always going to be human in the loop and you're still going to have to do your own analysis. You can't quite outsource all of it to an AI, but I think that's going to make a massive difference. And I think it's already had profound change in the last 5-10 years, but we're going to see even more. So I think we're only halfway through that journey and definitely exciting times. I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Dan?
Great. Hi, everybody. Dan McAvoy. I'm based out of Chicago, so you might see it's dark. The day has yet to begin. So for folks who are ending their day, happy Friday, and I hope it's a good day for me here. I work with HCL Tech, and I oversee our digital marketing at the company globally. That involves our user experience, our marketing automation, our channel activation, and audience targeting, partnering with our verticals and our marketing leads to work on our account-based marketing efforts because we are a B2B company and we're focused on sort of our top accounts in those ways. And then also, using those same skills and those same areas of remit on our internal side, because much like a lot of the other panelists here, we have a huge population of folks inside of our company that we are also bringing an employee experience to, a marketing experience to as well. So it's a fascinating journey in that way. I think everyone who has sort of contributed their wow moments already, I would co-sign every single one. And I think, Ramya, talking about it on the B2C side, I think it's, the personalization is really interesting on the B2B side as well, because obviously on a personalization on a B2C side, you're talking usually to a buyer. And on a B2B side, you're talking to buyers. So how do you personalize a story of, one service or multiple services to a CTO, a CIO, a CMO, a CEO, and on and on and on, right, in different ways in order to make that as interesting as possible. But if I was going to say something different and separate from what's been talked about already, an area of passion of mine is also in how data and analytics fuels user experience and customer experience and sort of total experience of how people really experience, you as a company and as a brand. And, one of the emerging technologies and sort of technology practices that has really wowed me and has become a huge efficiency for me from a technology standpoint is the usage of design language systems. So rather than, like we said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, doing individual code for an individual web page, being able to be building reusable components and parts that are repeated and sort of injected with personalization and different content in different ways, in different channels, on different products, technology products, allows a company to really control their brand, really, sort of evolve their brand as the analytics of how people are and are not interacting with your platforms and experiences come to light through that data. And it allows us to really sort of evolve how, in the same way you would think about a storefront, right? If people were coming in and they were going to a certain area of your store, but they weren't going to another area, and you would change the physical layout of that store. Same thing for digital platforms and the usage of technology that allows you to do that on a dime rather than spend 6 months, a year having to go through web replatformings and redesigns, and all this has been a massive efficiency gain in marketing. And so that's a technology area that really has exploded quite a bit in the last couple of years. It's really been impressive to watch.
Thank you all. What we'll do, we've already started receiving some questions, and some of that will get covered as we go through the conversation. But let's start at the marketing value chain level, right? Can we talk about the marketing value chain, and is there a new marketing ecosystem around the marketing function today in terms of text tools now becoming integral part of marketing services? How has that value chain and the ecosystem itself evolved, right? Ramya, any thoughts from you on this?
Sure, thanks, Sukanya. And I'm going to speak from two components. One is my team is a global capability center. That is an organization that is 8,000 miles from our customers, and we're trying to build our marketing content from here and serving up audience that most of my team may not have even seen or visited or even experienced one of our Lowe's stores. So that's one background. And the second one is really around being a GCC. What are those tools that we need if we have to be we have to be an integral part of a larger organization. And of course, Lowe's has a Bangalore office because we do the follow the sun model. So today, if my team here, and I'll speak about my creative team, we actually build all the creatives, whether it's copy, whether it's design, whether it's video, all of that in Bangalore, and we serve that up to our customers. Like I said, 60 million customers getting this messaging in multiple different platforms. And to do something like that, we need very strong workflows, whether it's workflows that help us get what our business wants, our brand team wants, and how do you sort of follow that? How do you project manage? How do you sort of track time and make sure that you're giving the final deliverable to a team that is not your own, who needs to push that out using either tools like Salesforce, to communicate that message, or in social media platforms. So for me, the first and the most fundamental change that's happened and that helps us drive that value chain is really getting those tools that makes us one large organization. So the marketing team in the US and Bangalore is just defined by location, but not the body of work. So from that perspective, we're able to sort of create content, deliver content in a timely manner, and also understand what our customers like and don't like. If they're not able to track it, how do you change that messaging? How do you impress upon a homeowner who's like you and I? They're also into DIY projects versus our pro customer, who are mostly Latino, that's a Latino base, but also people who don't have any time to look at your advertisements. They're in and out of the store in a couple of minutes. You need to give them the best deal. You need to talk sales. You need to talk offers. You need to talk promos to them. Whereas you talk to your homeowners to excite them to go and do their patio, redo their patio, buy that grill that they probably don't need, but spring's coming, summer's in, so go and replace the grill. So all of that needs tools, the back-end tools that needs to be really strong. And that's why my focus is really on that for this conversation. And of course, you need partners like Google and Bing and Metas of the world to take your message to the next level. That's the front end face off that happens, where we use all of our levers to drive that message. So that's the two parts that help keep my team moving, and Lowe's moving ahead as well.
Thank you. Dan, any thoughts from you? Would you want to pick up some part of the value chain and talk about how it's really changed with tech and tools?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, and then again, it's really useful that Ramya and I, can kind of look at this from, some different kind of buyer's journeys, and Ranjita, and Mark, I'm sure you can chime in as well. But, Ramya is really talking about, that instant sale, right, of catching the professional buyer in that moment, when, he or she needs to make something happen. They need a tool, they need an appliance as quickly as possible. Same thing, catching the homeowner in that moment of dreaming about summer ahead, right, and the grilling that you're going to do. I think what's really interesting as a contrast in the B2B space is that our transaction cycles can be 12, 18 months that we're talking to a client, right? So rather than buying the grill in a moment of dreaming, it's buying the 4-year contract over 18 months, right? And so it's a very different conversation that happens. It's one about influence. It's one about adding information when the customer or when the prospect is ready and looking for that information and these sorts of things. And so there's a whole stage of if you think about sort of that more traditional, low funnel of buying, there's a whole stage in there when an audience is interested, is learning about you, is talking internally as a buying group, is thinking about their budgeting process, thinking about their previous contract with their previous service provider, and the ability to really on an account level, which some of you may be familiar with, account-based marketing, be able to drip feed and understand from the sales team, understand from potentially the client partner, if it's an existing account, what is that frame of mind that the buyer is in right now, being able to customize the content, customize the messaging, customize the experience, in those moments is hugely driven by technology, hugely driven by like Mark said, data technology, like I talked about experience technology, like was talked about sort of the multi-channel, how are we touching them in their web journeys, how are we touching them when they come to our website, how are we touching them in their emails, and what are those messages in each of those areas. So in that sense, that's where a lot of the net new tools that you mentioned, Sukanya, really come into play in my space, right? Some of those tools that are being used right now to serve the right advertisement, to send the email at the right time, to customize the experience. It's this is all bleeding edge stuff that really has come out in the last like 3 to 4 years, in the mature way that it's coming right now. So that is a huge area of expansion, and it's a huge area of focus. And I would say, one of the things that Mark touched on around sort of data is, data versus insights. Similar thing from my point of view is with so much data coming from those technologies, it's in that stage of low funnel. How are you separating the signal from the noise? Because there could be so much data coming in. There can be so many different, contributing factors coming in. How do you sort of funnel that down for your teams? How do you focus that? And that's a challenge that I think we as marketing leaders have to, help our organizations understand.
Thank you. Ranjita?
Sure. So I'll take the perspective of evolution here. And what I really want to talk about is now in terms of functions that are core to marketing, Now those functions, be it the brand function, the content team, the PR and media team, demand generation, be it the account-based marketing team, etc. So now all of these functions obviously have existed as we have known marketing. They have evolved as we have known marketing. But the aspect of tech sort of plays the role of a binder. And what I mean by binder is bringing together the essence of all of these departments and functions within marketing towards a common objective. And if I were to talk about it from the perspective of how we are looking at that at Wipro, the objective is about, if growth is that central theme, then the three main objectives that actually evolve out of it are largely about revenue, reputation, and relationships. Now, what do I mean by this? I'll just break it down for all of you. When we're looking at the aspect of growth, for instance, now marketing as a function and the existence of that function itself, there are often times when just this is questioned in one way or the other. Now, I'm not saying that the existence of the function is questioned, but what is the impact of marketing? What value is marketing driving? Where does marketing sit at the table? And where is marketing in the larger picture of things? Now, a common understanding is it is brand, so it is marketing. But I think the conversation today is shifting to a very large extent that it is growth and therefore it is marketing. And I think all of us as marketers, be it in the B2B, B2C space, are driven today by this one aspect, which is growth, and therefore marketing's leverage, their influence, and their seat at the table. Now, I'll break it down with certain examples. Now, I'll take two specific examples. One of them being, if we are looking at the aspect of tech and tools and how that now becomes a binder, if we talk about demand generation, and for a lot of organizations, the evolution today is towards how do you understand your customers better? How can you provide them with better experiences, better exposure to who you are and what you offer and how you do business? Then coming back to the point about generating more traction with them, more demand from them, and also having the ability to understand, synthesize that demand and meet the core needs of the customer. So just for this, of course, there is a massive explosion of tools and tech just for this particular purpose. Now, a lot of organizations either use disparate tools or they use a tool stack, but at the end of the day, the objective of that remains the same. The objective is how do you synthesize all of this, bring it together, and ensure that you're trying to make sense out of it in a way that it fuels the very reason of why some functions exist, the value that those functions generate, and of course, how are you more meaningful, both within the organization and outside the organization. So for instance, Dan, you alluded to this about campaign management. So then, absolutely understanding everything about campaign planning, the impact of a campaign, the synthesis of outcomes, what should be the next steps with respect to customer engagement. And there are now very good tools in the market which are actually focused on measuring just this and give you results in minutes. So you have your whole visual play in front of you, and what do you now make out of it is the question. And that's where each organization and even the maturity of the marketing function is what comes into play. How mature are you to derive meaning out of all of those insights, and how are you then effectively using it into either your very basic demand generation activities or you're fueling a deal instance. Now, if it is a 4-year deal over an 18-month time frame, what do you do to keep the customer engaged? And this is a question we deal with every day. This is a question that sales teams come back to us with, that, okay, now we have this next stage of the deal cycle coming up. What can marketing do to influence? And I think we have evolved to a certain extent where we can ask some very pointed and basic questions, which are more about driving impact and value versus task-based or activity-based functions or outlook, right? So even components of account-based marketing, if it is demand generation through ABM, if it is events, if it is content, tracking customer journeys, tracking customer experiences, again, the right tools or the right tool stack can make a significant impact on this. So that in a nutshell is what I would summarize to say, that if all functions today can be viewed as having a common objective, and that objective is growth, and of that, what do you then do to drive growth? I think we are bringing the whole marketing value chain to a logical place, and something very meaningful to take forward from here.
Thanks, Ranjita. Thank you. I think you spoke about some of the pointers that we will use in our next question conversation around outcome and value. I think that's going to be something important. But before that, Mark, your obviously role focuses on technology and effectiveness. From a tools and technology point of view, do you see some things being added to your kitty that helps you do your work much better? Anything specific that you want to talk about, which we didn't speak about till now?
Yeah, I think probably the only 2 or 3 points I'd add to that, and again, agree with everything that's been said. I mean, the technology is clearly impacting every single part of the marketing value chain that's happening now. There's no doubt about that. The one thing I think that I'm probably most interested in at the moment is that customer experience. Because if you look at that in terms of your traditional marketing funnel or a customer journey, understanding how marketing is going to interact with that customer all the way through their buying journey is really key to working out how we can best utilize them and guide them through that buying journey and engage them in the best way. Dan made a point earlier in his section around B2B buyers aren't in marketing all the time. I think a number of us would probably have seen the LinkedIn B2B research, which says most B2B buyers are only in market 5% of the time. But that doesn't mean they're only engaging with you 5% of the time. They're engaging you with your whole different parts in their buying journey and their customer life cycle. So I think for us, if you're looking at things like experience, and maybe to answer your specific question, how does the technology therefore plug into that? I think there's probably a few key points. One is the use of personalization. So we've touched on it a little bit, that personalized experience of right message at the right time and the right content and the right format for clients when they're at the right part of their buying journey. Very difficult to do correctly, by the way, but if you get it right, it really is the golden mantra of any marketing campaign, especially in the B2B side. And then we're also seeing other tools come into the fray, which have many different uses, but really can actually help this sort of journey. So take something like a chatbot. I think a lot of people might have initially seen a chatbot as something which was a way of bypassing a human or saving some money. But actually, chatbots can have the reverse view where someone might look at your website and actually a chatbot can assist them in a way you wouldn't actually talk to a human while you're on a website. So there's sometimes a nice middle ground for introducing just that sort of technology in a way you wouldn't have done before to provide a better experience. There's also some risks with that. I mean, I'm personally somewhat paranoid about how we get that right. There's been horror stories of chatbots maybe not saying quite the right thing that you'd want them to clients and things, and they can be prompted the right way. But I think this all comes down to the execution of the technology. And probably the last 2 things I'd land on before we move on is actually sentiment analysis as well. So I've talked a lot about the top of the funnel, and marketing has a role to play all the way through. We spend a lot of time in our client health teams looking at how do we engage with clients. We do the usual stuff like an NPS score, and we are very client centric, and we want to make sure we understand them. But with the new technology, it's not like once a year you get a view of how a client thinks about you. I think we're going to get more and more sentiment analysis coming out from the AI tools that are coming onto the market now. That'll give you a view of how clients are feeling about us any given week, month, day across the year, which will really help us uncover where things are going well, where there's opportunities, and frankly, where things aren't going well that we want to get on top of as well. So that's probably the 1,000-foot view, because every single one of those is probably a topic in itself, but so much potential, and that's the exciting thing I think at the moment.
Very interesting. So many different case studies and use cases where marketing has really made a change. My next question is again going back to value and KPI. Have organizations rethought the value that they're getting out of marketing, and what are the KPIs on which they will measure marketing today? And is tech or the use of tech now guiding some of those value definitions and KPI? Dan, if I can have some thoughts from you.
Sure. Yeah, actually, this is a really interesting area where again, I think a lot of us have all talked about it. Ranjita talked about sort of the wider view of marketing as well. This is an area where I think, the technology product area has brought some knowledge and some methodology to that KPI tracking for myself and, for the industry. Where, in technology product development, you have these concepts of, and when I talk about that, it's building a technology product, for an audience. And, obviously you're going to get a lot of data through that. And, there's the concept, and some people on the call might be familiar with, of OKRs, objectives and key results. And, when we talk about that, what that does in technology product development is to say, what are your overall, objectives, sort of the big picture umbrella objectives that you are trying to do with this technology product, right? And then when you think about your 3, 5 objectives, you can break down each of those into key results, which are very, very specific, measurable, trackable, data-driven key results that would prove the efficacy of that objective, right? And then what you can do from there is you can then look at a cross-functional team, myself, Mark, everyone on the call working together in different methodologies, as a content creator, as a user experience person, as an analytics person, working together. We might be across different teams. We might be across different geographies, right? But we all can share that as a key result and an objective to push that product forward. And the same methodology can be brought to marketing and digital marketing and marketing planning, right? So using objectives and key results to really drive that also allows you to simplify, because again, like we talked about, there's this just explosion of data, explosion of tool sets, explosion of methodologies that you can use to reach customers. And using that framework really helps you kind of put on those horse blinders and focus on what is the value that you're trying to create for the customer, what is the value that you're trying to create for the company, and how do you sort of mesh those two things together. And so in a zone of KPIs, right, it allows you to kind of filter those KPIs and say, what are the most important things that are going to, be the signal data that says we are achieving, we are maybe not quite hitting the mark in these certain areas, so that we always have that thermometer kind of health check of where we're going. The other thing it allows you to do is kind of be ambitious, right? Set some goals, set some things that show that you're moving your function forward, your company forward, your relationship with the customer forward. And those OKRs might not always be achieved, right? They might not be 150% achievement every single time. The goal is to be thinking about, and there's this concept of roof shots versus moon shots, right? You don't want to make it impossible and set, I'm going to make $50 billion for the company, in the next 12 months, when you're a $13 billion company. It's not realistic that you're going to, do that from your perch in your area. But if you think of a quote unquote roof shot, that example was a moonshot, but a roof shot of saying, we are going to iteratively, expand, the marketing sourced opportunities by 10%, 15%, these sorts of things that push your organization to really focus on, how are you going to do that? Who are you going to do that with from a clientele standpoint, from a persona standpoint? Where are you going to do that from a technology product standpoint, or from a geo or service line standpoint? Being able to really focus down and use your technology tools to filter and focus instead of being overwhelmed with all that stuff is really an important way to leverage KPIs in an effective manner. And like I said, in a lot of organizations, you're talking about a journey of this technology usage used to be the domain of one team, right? There was a digital marketing team in digital marketing, or the MarTech team owned the technology. That's no longer the case, right? Every single marketeer is a digital marketer in a way, right? Is a data marketer in a way, is a customer experience marketer in a way. And so this allows us to give that kind of power and responsibility to the wider marketing organization to really own this in a way that helps us stay aligned, whether you're a 50-person marketing team or a 400-person marketing team.
So one quick question to you, Dan. You spoke about the roof shots and the moon shots. And do you think how people define the roof shots in terms of what is that incremental value? The use of tech has made a difference in terms of what that incremental value is. And like, do you think it's a slow, like a linear change, or it's a step change? Because there definitely has been what has been probably 2%, 3% earlier. But do you think it has happened slowly over a period of time, or was there like a step change with the introduction of technology?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think technology has, really, had some great leaps forward in both, in a couple different ways, right? Obviously, we think about tools, enabling tools, customer experience tools that help you get your message out more effectively. That can certainly increase the impact of your effort. And if you're doing it in a smart way, like Mark said, if you're deploying the chatbot, in the right way that helps you and helps the customer forward the conversation, that can certainly increase that efficacy. But I think the other part of it is that, having more accurate data allows you to make those bets in a right way, right? So you start to get the idea of what is my seasonal data year over year, right? What is my seasonal data, quarter over quarter, so that I can understand, okay, my customers, again, I'll talk from the standpoint of myself, we see a big surge of customer interest leading up to the end of their fiscal years as they start planning their next fiscal year, as they start closing their deals on that year. And so that helps us from a technology standpoint to say, okay, we know that if we're going to make a big bet on a campaign, we are going to really focus on a customer in a certain time. This is when we are going to do it. So again, using that data has allowed us and will continue to allow us to be smarter about when we place those bets and how we place those bets.
Got it. Ranjita, you spoke about the value dimensions that your organization believes in terms of revenue, reputation, and relationships, right? Have these been redefined for marketing and what the impact of marketing is in the recent past? And do you think tech plays a role in how the expectations from marketing in enabling these three have changed?
My response to that would be that, just having this clarity actually simplifies our outlook to a very large extent. So it is not that there are so many KPIs and every market unit. And what I mean by a market unit is, for instance, I'm looking at the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, India market segment. The other market segments are the Americas, the Europe. Now, across each of these market segments, and keeping in mind the differences, which is largely more about how our customers, the outlook of customers in these geographies, or our own outlook in these geographies, the core essence of what we are trying to do remains the same. We have to grow in these geographies. We have to engage with our customers consistently, better, look at more ways of creating value with our customers. And in that process, also organize and streamline ourselves in a way that we are able to service all of these existing requirements, emerging requirements in a consistent way. So looking at the broad levers of, let's say, revenue, relationships, and reputation helps us to narrow our definition of what our focus should be. And when we're looking at markets which are so diverse, the key aspect is how focused are you, and how clear are you about what you want to do in these markets, so that you're able to drive more value and impact accordingly. So now this is not just true for marketing, this is true for any function that is obviously enabling each of these geographies or the market units. But coming to marketing, I think the most simple answer to this would be, if we are talking about revenue, the broad things that drive revenue, it is about understanding demand, capturing demand. It is about deals, both how do you generate deals, how do you synthesize and process deals, and how do you take it to a point where it is a success. So in terms of you winning the deal, in terms of you having seen the deal team or the sales team through their whole life cycle of that engagement with the customer, created the right channels of influence, the right impact, so that you've come to a favorable outcome. Then if I were to look at the aspect of reputation, for instance, so it is about your reputation, your outlook in the marketplace. So it is PR, content, activities you do along with media. It is how your customers are perceiving you. So various aspects of customer engagement, which can be taken out into the market in more visible ways, be it customer engagement, testimonials, or simple things that really fall under those categories. The aspects of how these are enabled or why these exist, there really isn't a question or a doubt to say, okay, do you really need to do this and what is it going to lead to? Because they are so simple, they are so well crafted, both in terms of the impact and the objective of why we are doing it. It is more about how successful can you make it, or what do you need to make it happen. So today our conversations are largely about, and when we are talking to business teams and sales teams, what can we do to enable a certain activity that marketing is trying to put in place in a geography, versus we don't need this because we don't think there is any outcome or anything that we can get out of it, etc. Now that used to be a conversation of times gone by. It's not the conversation of today. And when we are talking about relationships, now this is either it is customer relationships, it is partner relationships, relationships with influencers, industry bodies. There is always an element of why we are doing it, measurability around it, and the outcome is fairly visible. So there isn't much of I would say, a blur as to why a certain activity is happening and what are you going to get out of it. So the point that I'm making is, if having a simplified outlook such as this helps us align a lot better with our partners in different markets, our business partners. It helps us streamline our own teams, our internal organizations to function towards these outcomes. And while I'm on this topic, I want to touch upon the aspect of marketing talent. Now, this is important because it is about marketing's impact, measurability, and even future outlook. The talent that we have today and what are the different ways in which we are engaging the talent or even looking to upskill that talent. And overall, keeping in mind that these are our outcomes and this is what the function wants to deliver for the market, how do we rethink and redesign the way our own teams are structured? What are their responsibilities? And if I were to bring in the angle of tech in this, it complicates the equation to an extent, but to an extent, it also simplifies it. Why it complicates is, okay, now you know that there is this tech. How do you upskill your talent on this particular tech so that, again, it's not just the, let's say, the MarTech team having an understanding of that technology, but the whole marketing team as such having an understanding of how to use that technology. And if you're in a certain market, what implication does it have for that market? What it simplifies is the skills or the aspects that you will necessarily defocus, but aspects that you will develop on. And that development is related to the future outlook of the function itself. It's related to the future outlook of the people that are in the function. So I think all of this is a big ecosystem that's really making itself visible. We are all a part of it. And simply put, it is also redefining the aspect of impact, and the KPIs of yesterday are not really the KPIs of today, while the core essence of that KPI remains the same. That's how I'll put it.
Yeah, I think you defined ecosystem and value both quite interestingly. For the next question, I'm going to modify that a little bit because I see one or two questions from the audience. In fact, two questions from the audience which are on similar topic. So Dan, this is going to be a question that I'll ask you first. Is there a framework that you look into when you decide the tech landscape for the marketing function? right? I mean, that's the question. But the two questions that have come in, and if we can blend in a little bit of that, is if it's a startup with limited investment possibilities for their, let's assume they've not given us what kind of a startup, but let's assume it's a B2B startup with limited investments that they can make into tech. How would you ask them to think about prioritizing that investment? And there's another question from an audience member saying, how much do you think about build versus buy or dependency on your service providers when you look at tech investments for your function? I've combined three things. I know, Mark, you can take your time and slowly think about them and tell us.
Thank you for that. So let me try and unpick that in a few different ways. I mean, I think the first part, I suppose, in terms of how you go about creating a tech strategy at the top level, I actually think it's not that dissimilar from how you go about building any strategy. There's a general process that you should work through, and I'll cover that in a little bit more in some detail. I think one of the key parts to it, though, is it can't be done in isolation. I think it's not an isolation within marketing. I think a few of my co-panelists have said, marketing doesn't work in a vacuum. It can't be just marketing technology building it. You've got to work with stakeholders right across the marketing ecosystem. Everyone's in some way responsible for helping to deliver this and making sure it works. On the flip side, you've got to work with partners right across the entire organization. So working very closely with sales, strategy, operations to make sure that all many cases are going to be end users as well, or at least beneficiaries of the technology and the outcomes. So you've got to make sure you're working closely with them to understand what they want to do. And then the third part is actually the partnership between marketing and IT really can't be underestimated. And sometimes the lines even become blurred because IT is getting so close to the marketing side and marketing is getting very close to the IT side. It's basically one small virtual team, which is a great way to work. It's definitely the partnership you need to make this successful and bring things to life. To maybe touch on one of the questions I think you asked at the start is how you might think about this from a startup's perspective. I think the way I would probably think about it is, don't get overwhelmed. There's literally thousands and thousands of marketing tools out there. And even for a large enterprise organization, you don't need them all, certainly not as a startup. I think you have to work out, there's probably going to be many, many challenges a startup faces, but you probably have to try and figure out what is the first 1, 2, 3 big challenges you or your particular startup is facing that you want to crack. And that will really dictate where you start on your journey. So I think, for example, if your biggest challenge is something like lead generation, you want to make sure you've got the right technology to implement campaigns, capture leads, and progress through the funnel. You're probably not spending millions of dollars in building your brand if you're a startup, for example. Again, so the challenges really do, and the technology will really depend on the situation you're facing. So it's a little hard to give a generic answer to that question, but I do think that my one piece of really advice and encouragement there is that just pick 1 or 2 things. You don't have to automate everything. Everything doesn't need a technology solution. You might even need very bare bones technology. Put that marketing dollars as much as you can into activation rather than building technology, because I think the activation is going to be the most key part, especially on a very small budget. I think your other question around whether you should, how much you should procure.
How much should you insource, outsource? How much should you depend on external technology or vendors, third-party vendors?
And I think that, again, it really comes back to your strategy. So maybe I'll cover how briefly how I go about building a strategy. And I think that really gets covered as part of that, because your strategy should dictate how you go about doing it. I mean, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's some of it is basically strategy 101, but the general thing, what are the goals of the business? And then what is the goals of marketing? So those two things is your starting point for anyone building a strategy. I think really the next key, most important point is assessing your current state. What are your current technologies landscape? What is the current gaps in your capability? Where do you have an issue at the moment? Do you have technology that's not working, not being utilized, it doesn't integrate, whatever it might be? So I think really understanding where you want to get to and where you're coming from is the starting point for any good strategy you're building. Again, this is not technology specific, applies across everything, but definitely is certainly true in the tech space. Then the third part is then really getting that good understanding of your customer journey. So if you don't understand what your journey looks like for a customer, you can't really work out how you're going to make that strategy come to life with the right tools and technology that are going to be key to make it happen. And then, and only then, you start getting onto your technology requirements. So you have to understand all of the above first, then you can start working out what do you want to do and what do you want to deliver. I think in this particular stage and a lot of the work I've been doing, we've really looked at what types of technology do we need as our baseline, our fundamentals? Because again, you probably don't want 100 different pieces of marketing technology, all with different vendors. So we've basically worked on what are some key ecosystems we can work around and try and work that plug together. And this is probably, to answer that question, is one good example of where you do want to outsource. You don't necessarily want to build the tool yourself. There's some fantastic industry leading products in the market. We're working very closely with Adobe and Salesforce at the minute. We're building our technology platforms around those two tools. They're not going to be the only tools we use, but understanding how they fit into our strategy and roadmap becomes the key. I think then when you go beyond that, you start to look more around how are we actually going to implement that technology to make it successful? Because it's all fine and well having technology and roll it out, but does it work? Does it integrate? Do all these things stick together in a meaningful way? Do users understand how to get the most out of it? And as we track it over time, is it giving the business case that we actually envisioned to deliver right at the very start? And I think then and only then, I think for me, I think there is definitely a use case to, as part of your monitoring and optimizing, to look at where do we actually need a tool or some technology that's bespoke for us that we might want to create in-house. So, and that really comes down to what are your capabilities as an organization. I take Genpact, for example. One of the big things, we're an AI first company. We do a lot of AI ourselves. We deliver it for our clients, and we deliver it internally. So when we are looking at what AI capabilities we need, we can build some of this ourselves. Not every organization is going to have the capability to go and do that. So I think it comes down to, I do think there's definitely outsource, or at least procure the right products on the open market are definitely a key part of any good foundational strategy. It's pointless spending millions of dollars to build something that already exists and is best in class. But where you have the right capabilities as an organization and you can have some real value add, there is definitely a use case for plugging things in that work for you and work for your organization that you can build on and use on top of that. So I think that's probably the way I would think about it. Hopefully I've answered your 3 questions there as part of that, but I'm happy to follow on if required.
And I might add a little bit
Yes,
onto that if I could. So co-sign everything Mark said. If I'm going to put my sort of startup hat on, right? Because I think some of the questions that you combined were from the viewpoint of startup. There are tons of tools that you can grab that are low cost or no cost or open source. And divide those two, right? The low cost and sort of the open source, right? So, rather than jumping right in and signing a $500,000 a year contract with a technology tool, right? Oftentimes there is something that gets you 75, 80% of the way there for a much smaller investment that might be more of an open source solution, might be more of something that has existing frameworks in place, be it on the user experience side or on the data side, data architecture side, or on the process side, that allows you as a startup, allows you as someone who is maybe you can think of as a startup from a business perspective or a startup from a marketing practice perspective, right? Hey, we're going to start doing this new marketing function in a little bit of a different way. There are ways that you can bring a tool in that prove the data, prove the process, allow you to kind of fail fast and learn in a way, so that when if you want to kind of date open source, date low cost, and then marry higher cost, right? Later on, in your technology life cycle, it allows you to kind of go into that a little bit more eyes open and a little bit more intelligently. So I'd hate to disappoint, but I'm not going to make specific recommendations on that, but I think you could use the power of the internet to find some alternatives and these sorts of things in different ways. But the other thing to think about that in my career has been sort of a hidden cost that can smack you in the face a lot is thinking about the resource cost of the requirement of the talent that it's going to take to kind of sail the ship that you just bought, right? So you want to be mindful, especially if your budgets are slim, if you're being given money to prove something, you want to be mindful of how bespoke that talent is or how generalized that talent is in the marketplace, right? So there are tools that are much more easy to adapt and adopt by be it an analytics person, a UX person, a content creator, etc. And, in a startup environment and in sort of a prove fast, fail fast, evolve fast model, making sure that you don't get yourself into an area where there is a huge resource cost in association with the technology cost is really important for you to think about, because you can really back yourself into a corner that way. If you get yourself into a situation where there's a big resource cost plus a big technology cost, then all eyes are going to be on you for proving that efficacy as quickly as possible, and you're going to make your challenge a little bit higher. And then I think to the specific question of kind of build versus buy, Mark, I think is exactly right. I think if you're dating cheap and open source and then marrying some of the larger ones, then kind of the having kids is building, right? If I'm going to extend the metaphor even further, right? Because when you're building something, you are committing to the tech debt, the process debt, the upkeep of that, over time. And you need to make sure that you have a really firm foundation for what you're building. I think it can often be a mistake to jump directly to building, because again, if you find that, oh my goodness, I built this in the wrong way, I built this for the wrong audience, the additional investment that you're going to have to make of time and of money, if you're going to your COO and asking for more money, these sorts of things is going to be a very, very difficult conversation. And so it's really important in that way to think about that. And then, Mark said the magic words of, AI and generative AI. The other thing is that a lot of these tools are going through a massive reinvention right now of trying to bring in and test new AI models in their tools, in all different areas of the MarTech stack. And so thinking about contract length right now is also something that you want to think about, right? Especially in a startup where a lot of the tools are going to look very different in 18, 24, 36 months. You want to think about being a little bit more agile and fleet of foot, and your ability to kind of hot swap these technologies. And so not getting yourself too locked into, a long-term contract with a tool that might not be purpose-built for the future of how this thing is working in 2 years, 3 years time is really important.
Thank you. Ramya, do you have any thoughts around any of the three parts?
Yeah, thank you. I think Mark did a great job of giving a 101 on what to expect. And Dan, I loved your examples. So I'm just going to paraphrase a little bit, but I'm actually going to use Lowe's as an example to answer all three questions. The first thing is, while I want to distinguish between what marketing needs to do and what technology needs to do. Marketing owns the strategy of what we want to do, whom do we want to reach out to, what is our goal. So the KPIs really come from the marketing, and looking at technology should typically be to enable that, enable us to achieve that goal versus getting that mixed up. Fair point, we can't walk alone, we need partners, but there's an engine and then there's this whole thing that's pulling together, right? So for instance, at Lowe's, right? And before I even get down to Lowe's, let's state this clearly. You could be a bootstrapped startup, or you could be a Fortune 25 company like the one that I work for. We're always struggling for budgets. We're always running short of money, and we have to make decisions on what's the right tool or the right investments that we need to make. So there's never a large pool to work off. So having said that, at Lowe's, like, let's take the example of marketing. We have a very simple goal, like just two things. One is, how do we drive traffic to our .com and our in-store? Okay, so, and the second one is, how do we ensure that we're hyper focused on customer experience and the journey, the relationships that we build along the way, so that we convert them to become Lowe's customers and live with us for the rest of their time. So if these are your only two focus areas that you have, where do we want our customers? We want to meet our customers wherever they enjoy shopping us. Is it .com? Is it is it the app? Is it in store? They could start their journey anywhere and end their journey anywhere. So if that's what we want to do. We want to make it as easy as possible for them to engage with us, share, and therefore ensure acquisition and retention of our customers. If that's what we want, then it becomes technology's responsibility to help us understand, hey, what are those stacks or those tools that you need? Target, I mean, sorry, like, focusing on making sure you've got your targeted audience coming in to your .com, Lowe's.com. How do you use your design language systems to make sure that your .com is ready, it's adaptive, you're quickly changing the information based on the insights that you get? When do you use generative AI? When don't you use generative AI? It's because it's a buzzword. All of us want to use it. But where's the best use of it? Is that when you want to put more how-to user content that drives traffic from, from Google to or Bing to our site? What are you doing? Where are you using the tools to enable that KPI, which is, I want to drive traffic? What are you doing to build, using tools to get that customer experience and life cycle and journey in place? And who's that best person to do that? There's several tools, agreed, but what suits you the most should be the third component. And that sort of straddles into the third question that you asked, Sukanya, on what's a best mix of what you own and what you build and what you outsource. Again, our audience data is our gold mine. Okay. How we protect that audience data, how do we sort of enrich that, is our primary journey. And that's a primary journey of technology and data sciences teams. So that's a unified goal for the company. Why would you want to think of a third party to share that data? That's the kind of questions that we ask as business, and say that should help us say, if this is my gold mine, I'm going to protect it, and I'm going to go in-house and build my tools in-house. Whereas something else may just be a workflow that I need, or I need some things to just sort of drive my handheld in my stores. There are only 2-3 customers. I don't need to build the hardware and the software that works. I go and lean in on my third party. So in my head, it stems from the strategy. It stems from what do I want to protect the most, and then the decision on, what you build in house and invest, and what do you pick up off the rack. Yeah. And just the question for the startup, I think both the panelists, Mark and Dan, did a great job about it. But again, I'll come back to the same thing. You know what your KPI is. Picking only one or two things, I think my panelists spoke about it. Pick what do you want to do versus the whole suite of solutions. One step at a time is better than multiple, having multiple projects running. And therefore, questioning how's the easiest way to go, what's the cheapest way, what's my cheapest ROAS, what's my cheapest AOV, how am I going to spend the least amount of dollars and get the most value, should be the only question that today's marketers have to ask. So I'll pause with that.
And you did touch upon AI and the use of AI, and how can any conversation go these days without a question around it. So there's one question, and this is open to everybody here, whoever wants to take it, is can you give us some AI use cases where you're using AI for any components of your marketing? And I'm sure all of you spoke about it in disparate spaces, especially around data personalization, but maybe let's just do all the examples together once for people to kind of pick a list and not having to go through the conversation to cull it out. So Mark, any examples of AI or AI tools in how you're driving your function?
Yeah, probably what I would call out is the Einstein, the Salesforce tool. So Salesforce have a good AI tool called Einstein. We're using it as part of our rollout. We've got amongst a number of, we've basically clustered a number of our everything that's linked to data into the Salesforce ecosystem. So if you look at how that fits into the example I used at the start of the call around AI for business intelligence, it also cuts across things like how you can use AI integrated with your CDP, how we can use it for your account engagement and marketing automations. That cuts right across everything. I know you don't want us to give lots of detail on this one now, but I think Einstein is definitely a good one to look at as part of an integrated marketing stack. But it's just one example of many. I think the AI is the buzzword and Gen AI is the buzzword. I think the comments a number of my panelists have made is finding out when you need to use it and when you don't. Just because the tool has an AI capability doesn't mean you should spend lots of time using it. And every tool now has some sort of AI, because I think they almost feel like they've got to. But I do think that actually, when you've got those as part of an integrated tech stack kind of strategy, when you've got one AI tool, and that's the advantage of having an ecosystem of software that cuts across everything, that can be really powerful. So I think Einstein from Salesforce is a good example of that.
Thank you. Ranjita, any use cases where you're using the AI in your day-to-day, the way you operate your function?
I can just talk about an example from yesterday, and this was a colleague of mine and we were struggling to write some initial content, which was the same content to be used for across a few different channels. With some trial and error, we figured what the starting point of that channel of thinking can actually be. And of course, this is simple chat GPT prompts, but it really brings the larger question to the forefront, that the tool is there, but how do you use the tool in the most effective way? And I think that actually is the essence of the conversation, to make it very meaningful and to make it very relevant to what you are doing today, or how you want to present it. Now, what we also figured that, the initial few outputs that come out, they are really very, very tailored. I mean, anybody reading it can absolutely understand that it's a tool writing, it's not a human writing. So it's like a one-on-one thing in terms of what do you write, what comes out of it, how do you work on it, rework on it, and bring in your own thought process into the aspect. Now, at the start of the conversation, there was this point about human in the loop. And I think this whole piece of tech enablement that we spoke of, there is a huge element of, I would say, human thinking and prowess also evolving in this whole scenario of how do you get ahead in terms of using these tools and even, AI related tools and tech in the right way. So some of these are examples. How do you really look at a very basic framework of content, and then where do you take that forward? Even very basic aspects of design. Now, this is where a lot of organizations typically have large in-house design teams. Now, one of the things that we are also beginning to look at is how can we engage more and more design specialists who are trained on some of these tools. They possibly could be freelancers as well, by the way, but very, very in tune with what's happening in the market, versus a lot of people who have used traditional design tools and now are taking, I think, the very traditional way of leading themselves to using some of these tools, etc. So that, to me, the point that I would make is there's a lot of lateral thinking that's happening in this whole process. The tool is there, we understand how it can be used, or we're discovering the ways and means of how to use it. And then, of course, what's the best use case that works for us? So these are some of the initial, very starting use cases. Of course, there are more, which I can't talk about here. But at this point in time, these are, some of the things that I guess all of us are pretty much exploring with.
Dan, anything that you can share?
Sure. Yeah. So, as part of my function, I'm also driving the proofs of concept and scaling of, applying AI. And like Mark said, AI is a word that is using, one word to encompass a lot of very disparate things, right? There's data amalgamation and aggregation, there's, machine learning, there's, using data sets to apply it, whether that's a data set of content, a data set of image training, to, apply it towards the work that you're doing. That's a lot of what I would say, as marketers, we started with, right? And Ranjita, just highlighted some of those things around kind of, how do we supplement, how do we augment a marketeer's work, right? In order to, again, have that human at the center, but use the machine learning models, use the generative models to be able to increase their productivity, increase their accuracy in whether it's content writing or brand alignment and these sorts of things, increase the speed of processing of data and processing of insights, like Mark said, with using Einstein, which I will co-sign on that as a powerful tool. And then there's a whole other area of using generative AI and large language model driven conversational interfaces and these sorts of things, on the customer side, that I would say we need to be, as marketers, careful and responsible about. There's a metaphor that I would use, which is, truffle oil is a very fancy ingredient, right? That you would add to a dish. If you put too much truffle oil in a dish, it's inedible, right? And I would say that the generative AI, when you bring it to a customer, is something like that, where we run a risk right now. If you scroll TikTok, if you scroll Instagram Reels, if you scroll X right now, AI is actually starting to become a buzzword for low quality, right? Where people say, "Oh no, this song seems like it's AI. This video is like AI." Right? So there's actually a danger in that we might be overusing and over pushing, how we're doing this. And we need to be careful, if we want to bring quality to our customers, that we do it in a way that is responsible and smart usage of that, especially when we're exposing, whether it's an agent to a customer or a generative AI image to a customer, a generative AI story to a customer. We need to make sure that we're being responsible for that, because otherwise you could do actually some brand harm in how you're bringing, an AI tool to a customer in that way. So I'd say just be very, very, specific in how you are bringing it, and very, very kind of controlled in how you're bringing it, because, there's this concept of the uncanny valley of, the closer you get to a human-like interaction, the better we as humans are at discerning that it's not human, and we have a base sort of physiological reaction to reject the thing that is being brought to us, right? So this is an area where, from a human psychology standpoint, if we're bringing AI to a customer, we need to be very careful about how we're bringing it to people, because ultimately it could become a reverse of what we want, right? Which is to say, oh my goodness, we can use this tool to be much more, human and lifelike and all these sorts of things. But actually the customer might say, hold on, wait, right? So let's take Mark's example earlier. If we have a large language model driven chatbot, where the customer is interacting with our trained agent, knowing when the right moment is to have that trained agent hand over to a real life human is a critical part of how you would apply AI, because there's going to be a certain point where the customer is going to want to say, all right, I'm ready to talk to a human now. And when you, as on the sales side or on the marketing side, are going to want to get a human involved in that conversation and bring it forward. So I think knowing when and where that tipping point is, and how much truffle oil to put on your dish is a really important thing to think about, especially when you're exposing your AI to a customer.
Thank you. There's one more question here. Ramya, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, so from our perspective, I think AI is really the way forward, only for us to sort of make sure that we are, either enhancing customer experience or enabling productivity. And this is in store. So think of, we have about 1,800 stores across the country, several hundred, like a few 100,000 associates work in our stores, and whom we call them Red Vest associates. These are people who are frontline workers for us, and they're addressing customer questions about a program which is probably launched nationwide. There's a campaign, there's an offer, so on and so forth, and there could be several such questions. It's impossible for our Red Vest associates to know everything that is available in a store which has probably 100,000 products, or several different programs. So where we are piloting right now is, how do you make sure you have a simple text to text AI driven feature which helps on your my device or your handheld device in the store, which very quickly helps you ask the question and answer the customer right there in the moment, like, hey, I want to join this loyalty program, tell me how can I do that. You may not know, like, hang on, let me just punch that question, or read into my handheld. It's a voice to text, and then I'll tell you how to sort of register to the loyalty program. You're in the moment. This saves our Red Vista associates time to go back to the back office or the back of the store, search a document, come back and address. So to me, AI is most effective when you do things like this, which is, I think Dan spoke beautifully. It has to be specific. It has to have a clear mandate, and that also helps us measure how much time did we truly save for our Red Vest associates. How many people did we actually get to taking action in the moment? So that's the kind of projects that we're working on. Of course, there's a lot of buzz on design and copy and so on and so forth. I'll pause for now, and maybe a couple of years later we'll talk in detail there.
Sure. There's one more question. I don't know if we've covered it, but just want to ask everybody here is, the question is, how has intent-based marketing tools helped in marketing strategy, demand generation, and B2B? Anyone wants to take that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll jump on that. Again, at the top of the conversation, I talked a little bit about ABM. I think the challenge that any company that is running an ABM, account-based marketing approach might come into is the ability to, and here maybe I'll sum up a lot of different disparate things, right? The ability to know that intent of what a customer is looking for, what their intent signals are, in one category. In another category, then having the content ready and able to very quickly get content that matches that person's intent signal, and then also being able to then deliver that in a way that customer is looking to receive, right? So I'll give an example of, this is an example of AI tool as augmentation, right? There's a lot of AI tools out there that are going to help you discern that intent of what that customer is looking for, and from a buying perspective. Then once you know that intent, if you have your content in a structured technology, asset management that allows then the AI bolt-on of that to be able to find the right content, which allows a content developer then take that content and maybe, if it's 80% of the way there, 75% of the way there, do that 25% really important customization to the specific industry, the specific role that you're looking for in that intent buyer. And then take that over to your marketing automation platform. Let's say it's an email delivery, and a lot of marketing automation platforms are now having things like send time optimizations, right? So being able to know if that customer is in your database, right? Being able to know when would be the optimal time to send it to that individual's inbox so that he or she will open it, or will have the most likely open rate. And a lot of those automation tools also have subject line optimizations that are built in, right? A lot of the leading automation platforms have this now, so that you can then customize the subject line based on those intent signals, based on that person's profile in the past, so that you're using, again, AI tools to send to that person and send with a message that is most effective. So that's sort of an example of daisy chaining technologies in a couple different areas to really benefit that intent signal.
Super. I have one more question. It's a long one, and that can be the last question for the day. So now there's a lot of search that instead of happening on Google, it's now happening on a Google Gemini or a Chat GPT or any of the AI tools. How do you think that is going to affect ads and organic traffics? And how do you think a brand can get visibility in these situations? Any thoughts from anyone? Or is it right now too far-fetched and people are still thinking about, there's no clarity on what would people do differently? Maybe nothing's going to change and people are going to find their way around it.
I think Sukanya, I'll say it's early days, and I'm one of those people who gets impacted by things like this. But I think at the moment we're still thinking of cookie-less world. It's still, that's where we're stuck. How do we address search in a cookie-less world? So for me, it's early days, and I may not be able to offer any clear recommendation just yet.
The one thing I'd add is we had if you think a few years ago when Alexa first came around, that Amazon launched, and I think there was I don't work at Google, but I remember reading articles that Google was panicking at one point because people, rather than searching for things they want to buy, started saying, Alexa, order this, or whatever it might be. And it was taking search out the loop. And I think that what you've seen off the back of that is a real drive. You've got Google's got its own AI personal assistant, and it did exist, but it's continued to become a focus area. You've got Siri for Apple and whatnot. And the technology and the ecosystem and the different partners evolved to react to it. And I think your point about a cookieless world is a great one. We're all evolving in how this is going to change. I can see scenarios where you have a lot of open AI, we can all access it for free. You might start to see chargeable services or ads creeping in. And I'm not quite sure how that would work and how people will react to it, but you can see the change coming over the years because it won't always stay this way. How exactly it will play out is hard to predict, but I think one thing is definitely certain: in 10 years from now, our marketing strategies will look very different from today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah,
just very quickly, I'll be brief here. Yeah, I mean, I think that first off, the fact that the GPT 4.0 that was just announced is free tells you something. When something's free, it means they've cracked monetization. So I think, Mark, to your point, that means that they've got plans for monetization there, and they will roll that out once there's a user base that is big enough to be able to do that. So rolling it out as a Mac app and then a PC app thereafter, is indicative that they're going to roll this and sort of see how people use it, and roll the monetization in thereafter. I think what it means for us is, first off, that monetization is coming. So from an advertising model standpoint, there's going to be new ad models that come out.
You have one more platform to leverage.
Exactly. And then, from an experience standpoint, this is another reason why I think it's very important that you don't overcomplicate your experiences, because you're going to have to be able to turn those and shift those on a dime. So the way you build your website, the way you build, your code bases, all these sorts of things, you want to be making sure that you are not going too deep on that and creating too deep of a hole to dig out of as these things change. So you can kind of change with the times from there.
Super. There's one question around tech stack of specific organization that we don't want to go into in this conversation. It's not fair conversation. So I will skip that question. There's another question around B2B customer journeys with sales cycle beyond 6 months. I think it's a question that I think, Avi, if you can drop us a note and I will, if you can drop us your name and email ID, we can drop you the question, and we'll talk to the relevant team, the panelists here, and see if we can get you an answer offline. So, and thank you. I think there would be an email ID given for the registration. You'll find some email details there. If you can drop us a note, that would be great. Thank you so much. This was a very, very interesting conversation. We covered a lot of range of topics, and there were a lot of interesting insights, use cases, usable, practices that our audience could take back and think about. Obviously, as there is no answer that fits everybody, we spoke about frameworks to apply and questions to ask before you take your decision, and that's the right way to go. Thank you again. And this particular chat will also be available on our YouTube channel soon. So if any of you want to go back and look at some of the points discussed, please do look at the YouTube channel of nasscom. This should be live in maybe a week from now. Thank you again, panelists. Lovely to have you here, and have a great weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Sukanya.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.